Welcome to the Millennial Life Coaches Podcast. At MLC, our mission is simple: add value to help you take on massive action towards your life goals. Here, we feature amazing coaches from all over the world, share compelling stories, and discuss proven practices to help keep your energy high and in the flow. Learn more about MLC at millenniallifecoaches.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of How to Get Ahead with Millennial Life Coaches. I am Tanya, your host, and today I am joined by the amazing Damesha Craig. Damesha specializes in leadership coaching as well as helps recruiting within agencies. She's got a fantastic program, the Her and His Leadership Community, and really has gone through a beautiful journey of trying to understand her deeper purpose in order to be there to show up for others that she's working with at her fullest capacity. So welcome to the show, Damesha. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And just wanted to correct the community name. It's Her and His Leadership Garden, and that's totally fine. It's very long, so HLG is what we call it for short. So, but wanted to definitely have a community where I could coach one-to-many. And it's such a fun process building it. I just launched it actually just last week. So
exciting. Oh,
I know.
So love that as time of this recording. We've got big news.
I know, it's perfect.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit and get you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey, how you got here, how leadership was kind of the thing that drew you in.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my journey is quite remarkable in so many ways. Like, I'll give you the short of the long for the sake of the podcast, but I actually got my start as an athlete, and I was a former Division I athlete at UCLA, earned a full scholarship in track and field, and took a lot of my guiding principles as an athlete into the workplace. And I started off in sales, and then some marketing, PR work, and then ended up working for a recruiting agency. And it was amazing working there, and I was able to service a lot of different clients, one in which was in the gaming industry. And so I got my kind of recruiting start, if you will, in the gaming industry, and then later transitioned into tech. And I had such the opportunity to just be of service to so many different types of leaders throughout my career. And for some reason, I think because of the way that I showed up, people just trusted me with things, and trusted me to coach them, trusted me to, take on things that I'm, between you and I probably wasn't qualified for. But what I did is I just, I was such an avid learner, and I was there to just be a sponge, And I think, that guiding principle from when I learned early on is what really truly helped me. But fast forward, and I spent over a decade, I stopped counting after 10 years. I think it was more like 14 or so, but I spent over a decade scaling early and growth stage startups in tech. And that was just such a ride, if you can imagine. Like, I wore the people leader hat. But if you have worked in a startup, you know that you don't just do one thing, you do multiple things. And so I wore a lot of different hats, which really, to be honest, prepared me for entrepreneurship. And so now I've transitioned out of that and went on this entrepreneurial journey. But before I did so, I wanted to understand, what was I here for? What was my greater purpose? And, when I went on my kind of journey to discover that, I spent a lot of time with myself. And I spend a lot of time doing a lot of introspection and just deep work to heal the parts of me that I had kind of maybe ignored because I was on this like go, go, go hamster wheel. And I'd never taken time off to just pause. And I actually did that. I paused and decided, like this was such a beautiful opportunity to explore like what the next phase of my life would be. And what I heard from my higher power, who I call God, was to really show up for others in a full capacity, but first pouring into myself.
Oh my gosh. I have all the goosebumps hearing this. I
Aw.
love that you stepped away from mainstream hustle and really like went into yourself, because that is such a beautiful journey. And a lot of people, I think nowadays, we get so stuck in that hamster wheel of hustle. I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. We don't take time to do that.
No.
So that was, I think, such a beautiful way in which you embarked on this journey.
Yeah, and it also allows you to quiet the noise. And I think that's the biggest, my biggest takeaway, because there's so much outside noise, like whether it's social media, your friends, your family, your spouse, or other leaders telling you oh, this is what success looks like. I actually quiet the noise. I didn't take any calls during that time. Like I wanted to hear from my higher power, did a lot of journaling, a lot of spending time with myself, my thoughts, meditating, and just really understanding like, okay, what was it in my life, like where I showed up in my full capacity that lit me up, and honestly, I was already doing it, but the thing is I wasn't doing it at the scale that I'm doing it now. And so, what I heard from God is I need you to step more forward. And if you've ever worked in tech as a people leader, shout out to people leaders wearing tons of hats, that you're doing a lot of work that is unseen and people don't, it's like you're not stepping into the light, in that role. And so he wanted me to step more into my light and more into my purpose so I can serve a larger scale of leaders. And that's really what I'm doing. And I'm doing it in so many different ways, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Absolutely. No, and I love it. That was that faith-based nudge that got you out there.
Oh,
That's
yeah, always.
giving me all the goosebumps and all the feels today. I'm here for it.
I love it.
Getting ahead shouldn't mean burning out or following some outdated playbook that never really fit us anyway. That's why I wrote Intrinsic Leadership. It's a guide to help you reclaim your influence, align with your purpose, and lead with confidence without losing yourself in the process. Inside, you'll find stories, reflection prompts, and practical tools you can actually use to lead your life and work your way. You can grab Intrinsic Leadership on Amazon, Audible, or bookshop.org. And a huge thank you to Millennial Life Coaches for featuring me. I'm Melissa Castro, leadership coach, consultant, and author. Come connect with me on Instagram at Intrinsic Lead LLC or find me at www.intrinsiclead.com. Let's level up and lead from within.
So you step more into the leadership role. You said before we jumped on here, you actually went through Jay Shetty's program, which is incredible. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting. I looked at so many different, coaching programs, as I'm sure so many people do. And what really resonated with me was like just the way he showed up, and his authenticity. And I think also too, like his guiding principles around purpose. And because I was, wanting to step deeper into my purpose, it felt like the right timing. And really, I believe in synchronicity and messages and things happening at, such divine timing. And I think just his whoever was working for him at the time, DM'd me and told me a little bit about the organization. And I just thought that was so cool. I didn't even know that he had a school, I just read a couple of his books and that was it, so but what really stood out to me was his guiding principles and also just the way that he structured the program. And I prefer to work like alone in a lot of ways, but also in groups too. And so his program offered a lot of that. And really it just felt like I was a part of a larger purpose as opposed to just getting my certification, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And honestly, I feel like when you have experiences like that with her and his leadership garden, I feel like that kind of almost like embeds into the programs that you create because you've had that backstory of like, I know what it's like to have that group, but that individualized as well. And it kind of all combines together. Did that directly correlate to that? Or is there other things? How do we get to this? Tell us about the garden.
Yeah, so probably, I mean, a little bit, but I would say like what really made me like, develop the garden was a large part of it was the way that I saw leadership. And it was even the way that I coached people, prior to earning any certifications, and I saw myself included, as a work in progress, just like a garden. A garden is never done. You talk to a gardener, it's never done. And that's us. Like we're never finished. Like no matter how much we think we heal, like there's something that comes up and triggers us. Or maybe in a garden, it's like, a disaster that comes in and ruins the gardens, or tears up a particular function in the garden. And now you have to start over. You have to dig up the weeds. And so I think that's us too, like we're so close to nature, and so that's really, it was a large part of what I had already been doing before, but also to like how I saw myself. And I think like, anytime that you're trying to show up authentically, you need to start with yourself first and the way that you approach leadership. And I approach my leadership like a garden. I'm always figuring out like, what are the weeds that I can still use? What are the weeds I can pull to make room for other things? But also like, I have to water myself, otherwise I'm pouring from an empty cup. And so when I decided to come up with her and his leadership garden, a large part of it was I saw leaders that needed that, that needed a space to step into themselves, like a lot of people are searching for their purpose. They don't know what their purpose is. They don't know why they're here and they're craving it, but they also like don't even give themselves permission to do that. And so her and his leadership garden really allows for that.
Oh my goodness. I love everything about what you just said. That analogy alone, I'm like, because pulling out the weeds, keeping what
Yeah.
you want, like we are never done learning and growing.
Oh.
And as soon as we think we are, we probably have a lot more to do.
Exactly. And what's so interesting too is like with the garden analogy is it's like there's so many seasons where flowers bloom beautifully, right? And then they kind of like aren't blooming in certain seasons. That's us too, like nothing is meant to bloom all year round, us included. And so I think that's the time that we should get curious. We should be constantly learning ourselves and peeling ourselves back. I like to use the pomegranate analogy because onions make me cry, but I think it's so important for us to continue to peel ourselves back to get to the sweet spot of who we are. Like when I say leaders, I want to be very clear. I mean leaders in so many different capacities because you don't need a title to be a leader. And you can also be a leader in your own home as a stay-at-home mother, so and I have stay-at-home mothers in the community, and they're leaders in their home, but they're still wanting to show up fully for their families. So whatever your community is, whether it's your personal or your professional community, the goal is to understand yourself deeper so then you can show up more fully, because otherwise you're doing the community that you care and love for a disservice by showing up as a fractional version of yourself, which we're all guilty of.
Hi, listeners. Kelly Ling here, ICF certified executive coach and founder of Stork and Spark, where I support ambitious, expectant, and new parents navigate career evolution and identity. I was honored to be a featured guest in a recent episode of Millennial Life Coaches and love the community this team has built for us millennials. I'm excited to offer listeners a complimentary Power 20 session where we have 20 minutes together to tackle your big questions like how to tell work you're pregnant, how to return to work from parental leave with confidence, and how to actually enjoy being a parent and lean into parenthood and career as part of your identity. Find me on LinkedIn and send me a message mentioning this podcast and I'll share next steps. Cheers, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love this. And I love that you segregated and you broke down like the different aspects of leaders, because that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
You do a lot of leadership coaching, a lot of life coaching, but there are different varieties and different ways in which we can be a leader. So maybe our listeners out there are kind of being like, am I a leader? Where do I fit in that? What kind of advice, tips, suggestions would you give them if they're just kind of being like, how do I start stepping into that fuller version of me?
It's interesting because there was a gentleman that commented on my post and said, not everyone is meant to be a leader, and I don't know if he was, being just rude or wanted to make a comment, a negative comment, or if he was just, like expressing his opinion, like either way, I welcomed it, and I said, it's so interesting. I actually believe everyone can be a leader, and it doesn't mean that they're leading all the time, because sometimes you step into a leadership capacity for a period of time and then you're back learning, so I think we are constantly in that, and when I say leader, I think a leader is both a student and a teacher. And so like depending on what your goals are, maybe you want to be like show up more fully in your family, like you can still lead in that capacity, or maybe it's you want to transition into a manager role, like that's in a leadership role, or maybe you're already an executive and now you want to shine your light a little bit brighter because you've been kind of like you've had a seat at the table, but not a voice at the table, So I think there's just so many different types of leaderships. And to be honest, like you get to define that. That's what's so beautiful about the garden. None of our gardens are alike. So you get to define that for yourself. And so you ask that question, and I turn it back onto the person, like, how do you define it?
Oh, I love that. Because it can be so many different things. And I
So
love
many different things.
the word shine your light so many times.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people in today's day and age, we go to put ourselves out there, we start shining, and we're like, scary, I need to back
Yep.
up. I need to
Yep.
stop doing this. So how do you encourage people to kind of step more into it and start tending their garden?
Yeah, I think it starts first with how much do you want to show up, and what capacity do you want to show up? Like going from 0 to 30 might not be for you. Like maybe it's like 0 to 0.5, and that's okay. Like you get to set your pace and also like understand how much you want to shine, right? Because not everybody wants to have a podcast or run a business or, be a leader in an organization. So I think it's really like, how do you want to show up? You don't have to show up online. You can show up fully in your community. Like you can show up in your own home, like without getting online at all. So I think it's really like, how much do you want to show up? And then the first step is like starting with yourself, peeling back your layers. So, I ask people to first spend time with yourself. Like what are the things that you have not given yourself permission to even look at, let alone heal? But what are the things that you haven't looked at first? Then we take a look at those things. And so I start with, some people call it the wheel of life, or others call it the circle of life. I like the circle of life. But we start there, and that's a great starting point. But then I also like to use the your life timeline, and take a look at like, all of the parts that make you up, and that's where I think is the best place for people to start, is to take a look at you, which we just don't give ourselves permission to do. We're so busy either judging other people or looking at other people's lives or, trying to get our next dopamine hit. It's like we're always doing all of these things, or we're just running, like whether you're a mom and you're running your kids around, you're, in leadership and you're, just constantly going to the next meeting and doing stuff. We just rarely take time to really sit with ourselves and take a look at ourselves. And from there, it's forgive the parts, that we're maybe not so comfortable with, and also forgive the people that maybe harmed us in that process.
I love that. And I love that you talked into forgiveness, because
Yes.
all too often in life, something happens to us and we don't give ourselves that grace to actually forgive the other person, or maybe even forgive the part of us that allowed it to happen.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. So just a little bit more clarity so our listeners can like really dive in and like, give her a call, because I feel like this would be super powerful for everybody. When we look at our timeline of our lives, what kind of things are we looking? Is it like the milestone moments, like the big things that happened? Are we looking for more of like the ones that maybe didn't necessarily feel that big in the time, but now looking back, we're like, oh, wait, there's something there. What kind of guidance do you give people as they start progressing and start looking at the timeline of their lives?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think it's multiple things. So first, starting with those beautiful moments, as I like to call the roses of your life, but then also looking at the thorns, like not just the events that happen, but also maybe people that hurt you, within that journey. Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was a parent, or sibling or what have you. But looking at your, trauma, which we hate to label things trauma, even though they are traumatic events that occur that affect us, or maybe it was an employer, maybe got fired at a job, so looking at all of those things, because all of those events, instances play a role in how you choose to show up as a leader, believe it or not. And, whatever you haven't healed, like the minute you're triggered again, if you use like the analogy of a cup, right? Like if I'm holding a cup and I have coffee in my cup, and Tanya, if you bump me, right? Like it's going to spill out. So same goes for us. Like whatever we're filling ourselves up with or not, and maybe those are even lies, right? Which we're so good at doing. We're so great at lying to ourselves and excusing things away and brushing things under a rug and all of these things, it still shows up in how we show up as leaders, how we show up as lovers, parents, family members, etc. And so I start there with people because I think if you can't look at yourself, you can't go further.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to look at yourself, all the parts, all of them, because all of them are so beautiful. Like all of the experiences that we have, I have this beautiful quote that I put up on social media, but I talk about our journey being like a crown, and our crown is adorned, by our creator, whatever you call your creator, I call mine God, with both jewels and thorns, and both are equally blessings because they make up who we are. And a large part of who we are, that is actually in the purpose. Like people are always searching for their purpose externally, and the purpose is actually within you, and it's within your journey, but you have to actually look at it.
And I love that so much because I feel like a lot of us, as we move through life, we don't think that the thorns or those moments of like what just actually happened are actually shaping us and creating who we are. Like I look back on my life and I can honestly say some of the most rockiest moments were my biggest blessings because they were the ones that catapulted me to a different area of my life, the next chapter of my life, right? So I love that the analogy of the crown having both. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about her and his leadership garden, the community itself. What does that look like? What's entailed? If someone wanted to get started or join in, what could they expect?
Well, first and foremost, it's on Discord and it's free. And so that's the first thing is it's free. Lots of people love free. But what you can get in there is a few things. Like you'll get calls with me weekly. You'll also get challenges to challenge yourself. Different motivational quotes, like some that are catered more towards women and some that are catered more towards men, as well as just ongoing chats. We're constantly challenging each other and inviting things into the chat that get people to think, and I think this is the time in order to pour into your garden, you have to be willing to open yourself up to new perspectives. And so that's really what you're going to get in the garden. And if you're looking to further your learning, I actually have courses that are partnered with the garden as well. And so I'm building out, I've completed one course, so yay for me, just last week. And so I have others coming. And so there'll probably be a total of about 4 or 5 courses that I'm gonna present to the garden. So it's just been really fun.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So if someone's out there and they're like, hey, Discord, hey, it's free, I can get in her world and I can start learning all this, where can they find it? Do they just go to Discord? Is it on your website? How do I access this?
Yeah, love that. So you can go to any of my social channels, and I'm Damesha Craig across everything. No underscores, no nothing, okay? Because I'm the only Damesha Craig in the world, and so so you can just find me on social. But you can also go to Discord and search it, and so it should come right up.
And we'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes too. So for our listeners,
Thank
we'll be able to get you hooked up so that you can get a hold of Damesha right away and join that community because seriously, this sounds awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Okay, so Damesha, we got to start wrapping things up here, but what advice would you give to our listeners, again, who are kind of starting in? Any closing thoughts, anything that we didn't quite cover that you really want to hit on?
Yeah, I would love to maybe leave the listeners with a quote. And I think this quote really helped me tremendously. Actually, 2 quotes if we have time. But 2 quotes that really helped me understand what purpose actually means. Because a lot of times I think we get tripped up on purpose thinking that is this big thing that we have to accomplish or do. And it really isn't. Our purpose, because honestly, we have multiple purposes in our journey. And, depending on the season that we're in, the stage that we're in life, like maybe our purpose is to spend time with ourselves and to learn ourselves deeply before we can help other people. So I think our purpose is so many different things. But there's a quote by Dr. Maya Angelou, the late, great Dr. Maya Angelou. And she says, our purpose is never one thing, but it's every life we touch. And so if you think about that, the reason why I have this garden community is so we can pour into ourselves and plant new seeds and be able to show up fully. Because if you think about that quote, right? Every single life that you touch, that could be someone at Starbucks. You spend 5 minutes with them. You don't know what your energy, that you chose to show up with is going to do for that person and how they're then going to take that experience with you and then show up for someone else or what they're going to do with it. That's a part of your legacy and also your purpose. And so that's probably one of my favorite quotes. And then my second favorite quote is by Irma Bombeck. I'm actually in Arizona, so it made me feel even closer to her when I knew that she actually lived in Paradise Valley. And so she's a writer and no longer with us, but just such an amazing writer. And she has this beautiful quote that says, "When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I wouldn't have a single bit of talent left and can say, I used everything He gave me."
Oh my goodness.
Doesn't that give you chills?
So much.
I know. I
Oh
love
my
that
God, that's
quote.
what I say too.
But I love it. And it's like really the mantra for my life. And so I think like, people, they look at me, I'm a single mother of two beautiful children, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're doing so much. But because it's so intentional and purpose filled, it doesn't feel like that. And, even though it does feel like work sometimes, but it feels beautiful and wonderful. And I'm trying to really leave it all here and empty myself, so I can use everything that my creator instilled in me.
I love that. And not only that, but you're sharing it with the world too, so everyone around you.
Thank you. And
Oh,
so are you.
that.
So are you.
Thank you. Oh, I love it. My goodness, this has been such an amazing conversation. Definitely gonna have to have you back. We will get Damesha's information in the show notes so everyone can access her. Check out her socials, check out the garden, and definitely if you have any questions, reach out to her directly. Think those courses coming up, you're gonna want to get on a wait list for or something. Just saying. Thank you
Amazing. Thank
so
you.
much for joining me, Damesha. And it has been such a pleasure doing this episode. This was another fantastic How to Get Ahead by Millennial Life Coaches episode, and we will see you on the next one.
Absolutely. Bye.